After a crazy regular season that seemingly went by in a flash, the Overwatch League playoffs are back. And for a third year in a row, it's going to look a little different. This time, everybody gets to participate. Not to mention there's also a region split and opponent selection processes. Despite the changes though, the playoffs are still looking to be pretty exciting. The burning question on everybody's mind is who's going to take the crown? Will the Shock be able to repeat, or is somebody else going to take it home? We're about to find out. Like with the regular season, I'm going to try my best to build up the pre-game hype with some weekly predictions for the playoffs. I could do them all in one sitting like with one of the regular season tournaments, but I think going week by week is just a better overall idea. For one, it gives you guys more content. But two, I'm bound to have a bad bracket as I usually do, so why even bother going through every single game? Don't worry though, if you're still really curious as to what my entire bracket is looking like heading into this event, I'll show you my full bracket at the end of the video, so stay tuned. For today, we'll be going over the first week of the tournament. Thursday through Sunday will yield a whopping 18 games, so there's a good amount to cover. But before we get started, let me talk about the sponsor of today's video. I am proud to say that this video is sponsored by DraftBuff. DraftBuff is a fantasy platform for esports leagues. You can join leagues for Overwatch and some other games out there you may be interested in. For the Overwatch aspect of it though, DraftBuff and I have teamed up to make my very own Fantasy Royale League in celebration of the playoffs, which you can join through the link in the description. Compete with me and other fans in this community to see who has the biggest brain, and you get a chance to receive an Overwatch League jersey courtesy of DraftBuff during each week of the playoffs. And guess what? It's completely free to participate. It will not cost you a dime. Select players in every week of the playoffs that you think will perform well and therefore earn you a lot of points. But the big catch is there's going to be a salary cap, so you have to choose your team wisely as some players are worth more than others. And this time around, DraftBuff is trying something new. Along with your 6 players, you will also be selecting a team to be a part of your roster and earn you some potential points. So here's the roster I'll be rolling with in week 1. I based many of my decisions on players who are known to show up big in the clutch like Choi, Decay, and Birdring. And I picked the Gladiators because I just have this gut feeling they're going to play exceptionally well this week. So, think you have what it takes to beat me? Then what are you waiting for? Download the app and click the link in the description to join today. Thanks to DraftBuff for sponsoring this video, and now back to your regularly scheduled program. To kick off the 2020 playoffs, the Boston Uprising will play the Houston Outlaws. The Outlaws haven't played in quite some time, so I'm very curious to see how well prepared they are for this event. Hopefully the extra time does them some good. Not that they'll really need it in my opinion though, because they have the special honor of playing the worst team in the Overwatch League, so they should have the advantage even if they aren't that well suited for this meta. No matter what ends up being played, I am of the belief that Boston's heads just aren't in the game. Since their mini resurgence wore off, it's been nothing but pain and suffering. Many of their games have been extremely difficult to watch. Even Vancouver are way ahead of them at this point. It's crazy to think about, but there is a legit tier break between them and the low tier NA teams currently. Besides their lackluster gameplay, you can kind of tell their players want the season to just be over already just by giving them a look. Many of them have expressed their sadness and frustration on social media. They don't really know what to do at this point. They probably end up going down without much resistance if I'm going to be completely honest, and I think the Outlaws end up taking it 3-0. Houston win the battle with their roster and with the mindset. Jerry and Myungbong might show us some life, but I am well prepared to see Dante, Meko, Jexay, and Repel take over and put these guys to bed. The other NA Thursday game taking place is Washington versus Vancouver. I'm fairly intrigued with this one. On paper, it could be a pretty good game. Two teams around the same skill level with hard carries on the hit scan roll. Shockwave versus Decay could be a matchup for the ages depending how things go. It kind of feels like the X factor of this game to me. Whether it be because one of these players has more space or one guy simply dominates the other, I believe this will be the pivotal aspect of this matchup. And I think this matchup will go in Decay's favor. He may be new to the Justice, but he is a guy that is here to play. He is a superstar, and he is going to do everything in his power to win. He didn't have an MVP-like season just to go out in the first round of the playoffs. He is going to will this team to a win. I can see it now. And to be completely honest, I think the Justice overall might just be able to abuse like a Winston comp or maybe some Roadhog. I don't know what it'll be, but I say the Justice win 3-1. The Justice are slightly more well-rounded, and I think they're going to generate a lot of space for Decay to get into a groove early on that Shockwave simply cannot match. And just like that, we are on to the second round of the single elimination knockouts. The Gladiators get to pick between Toronto, Houston, and Washington as the highest seed. Then the Reign get to pick, followed by Dallas getting whoever is left over. And I'm going to say the Glads pick Washington, then Atlanta go to Toronto, then Dallas are left with Houston. I feel like these matchups make the most sense, but I could be wrong for sure. So this round starts at 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon when the Glads would hopefully play the Justice. So I kind of see this being fairly one-sided. The Justice may have Decay, but the Glads do have Bird Ring to counter. If Decay can't get any leverage, then Washington will be in a very tough spot. It's hard for the Justice to compare, really. I think the Gladiators probably win 3-0 here because the Glads are simply stronger at more positions. OG on the Winston could be really good, Space has good versatility, Mirror's really flexible, and I think that Kevster also has a major leg up on Tuba and Stitch since he's not just a better Sombra player, but also way more flexible. I personally believe the Gladiators are coming into the playoffs confident, and I think that will reflect upon their first round of play. Game 3 of Friday's extravaganza will include Atlanta and whoever they choose, and I am of the belief that they will choose Toronto just because they have a decent track record against them. Besides that blunder in the Summer Showdown, they have consistently dominated this Toronto team, and the only time they did lose was in a map 5 in Toronto's best meta, and with Genji not being good anymore, their odds of success are looking quite high. Toronto needs a big hard carry to stand a chance, and I don't know if anybody's going to step up and deliver. It's not going to be Agilities this time, I can tell you that much. I think Logix might be able to get something done, but Edison has been on a tear as of late, so he might not be able to stand up to him. At this point, I think it might be up to Kariv to impose his will. If there's one person I can see outplaying his counterpart, it's definitely him. I just feel like too much has to go right for the Defiant to win this game though, and that's why I'm favoring the Reign 3-1. I just feel that their roster outweighs their opponents. The Atlanta tanks and DPS tend to show me more, so I have faith in them to maintain control and get this W. And last, but certainly not least, we get a potential Battle of Texas, Part 4 now? So now that Decay can't influence the game at all, this is going to be Houston's greatest opportunity to take down their rivals. That plus their extra time off I discussed earlier puts them in prime position to work some magic. But there's two problems that could be present. For one, they may not be very good at this meta, as we've seen them struggle in stuff like Dive before, as they couldn't even beat the Justice at the time. The other issue I have is that they still have taken an L to Dallas when Decay doesn't have a large impact on the game. If you can recall, Dallas played Onigot in a few of those map wins in their most recent series with Houston. Dallas aren't going to let this Decay falling out stop them, as they've already proven they can beat Houston without him. The meta could play a big role in this outcome, I feel. If we see Dive or maybe some rush-oriented stuff, I favor the Dallas Fuel. But if we see a lot of slow-paced comps with Roadhog, I like Houston. This one is pretty up in the air. I can't say what's going to happen for sure, but my gut is telling me to stick with a 3-2 Dallas win. I just feel that trusting Houston to go far in the playoffs is a mistake. Whenever I put trust into those guys, I usually end up regretting it. They will probably find a way to lose this game even though it is right there for the taking. They let these types of games slip away from them all the time, and I don't have a lot of faith in them to believe this time will be different. With my knockout prediction settled, we can dive into the double elimination part of this bracket. The order of who gets to choose their opponents goes as follows: Philly, San Francisco, Paris, then Florida. With that in mind, Philly 100% take Dallas because they are the weakest team available. From there, I think the Shock are stuck with a difficult choice. Atlanta and both LA teams are all opponents they could easily defeat. I could realistically see them picking any of those opponents, but I honestly think they want to go with the Valiant. It may seem kind of crazy given they're the 5 seed, but I think the Shock know this is a team they can comfortably beat. The Glads in Atlanta have slightly more upset potential in this scenario, so the Shock are going to go with the team they can bully the easiest. After that, Paris decide to go with the Gladiators because that's a good matchup for them, and that leaves the Florida Mayhem playing the Atlanta Reign. So to lead off this first round of the bracket, the top seeded Fusion will play the Dallas Fuel, and to be completely honest, I don't see this really being much of a contest. Unless Doha just goes bananas in a Sombra meta, their chances are slim to none, and even then, the Fusion are going to be able to hit just as hard because Hisu has become a top Sombra in his own right, and he'll be ready to answer back at any moment. What could Dallas realistically do here? I don't think they could do much. I see the Fusion sweeping and advancing to the next round with ease. The Dallas support line is heavily outclassed here, they have nobody to contest Carpe, and their tanks have zero advantages against Sato and Fury. The Fusion have all the cards, and the Fuel are going to learn this the hard way. The next game is the Florida matchup, and if they get stuck with the rain like I think they will, then they should be in a decent place overall. Since Florida hit their stride, their track record with the Atlanta rain is pretty good. And I mean, if we're heading towards any sort of Roadhog play, then I would be terrified if I was the rain. Atlanta, I think, faced problems at tank and support with this particular matchup. Gator and Hawk can't quite play at the level of Fate and Gargoyle, and I think Gangnam Jin is far more consistent than anything Atlanta is working with on their support line. While it appears to be a bit more even at DPS, Atlanta are still at the disadvantage. Even if Edison plays out of his mind, it would take a total team effort to outplay BQB and Yaki. Those guys are going to have a field day, especially BQB on that Ashe, unless he faces a ton of pressure. And I just don't see that happening. Florida win at 3-1. There's no way I would believe in the Reign coaching to make a good enough game plan to slow down the Florida superstars. If they can't even make proper adaptations against other opponents, then there's no way they could handle this. Next, we've got the San Francisco Shock versus the Valiant, and if they were to pick the Valiant, I kind of see the Shock imposing their will. It's happened a lot of times already this year, so I think they're well aware of what makes and breaks this Valiant squad. The Shock have everything needed to beat their division rivals. For one, they have players who will be able to keep KSP in check. That's pretty important. They have Ansan for the sniper duels, and tanks who are great with suffocating pressure. If they look at what the Glads did the other week, then they should be able to contain KSP no problem. And 2, Choi has an overwhelming advantage over McGravy, as he's just a far better and more versatile off-tank. He is way more explosive, and it's really not close. We've seen McGravy struggle against other good off-tank players like Space and Gargoyle already, so Choi undoubtedly would be able to exploit the same advantage. So yeah, I see the Shock winning in a clean sweep. It's one of those big versus little brother games. The Valiant simply aren't at that level competitively. They don't have the star power needed to keep up. That brings us to the final matchup of this round, aka Eternal versus Gladiators. I'm in a weird position if this matchup becomes a thing. On one hand, the Eternal are definitely better as they've already proven it, but on the other hand, I have this feeling that the Glads are going to enter the playoffs confident like I was saying before. I don't know if it's because they beat the Valiant recently or maybe it's for something else, but Paris could have their work cut out for them. If the Gladiators can work as a team around Sombra play or maybe just give Birdring the resources to take over, then this is pretty doable. There could be room for an upset, but honestly, I still do expect the Paris Eternal to take this in the end. They're a lot safer to pick, and they have the tools to counteract the stars on the Gladiators. Exy, he's a pretty well-proven sniper in his own right who can be just as dominant as Birdring given the right support, and I also just simply favor the Paris supports because FD God and Fielder are having the better seasons. I'm going to say the Eternal win it in 4. The Gladiators are just simply outmatched. They'll give us a good fight, but I think that Rush is going to better prepare his team. Simple as that. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think that leaves us with both the second round of the winners bracket as well as the first 2 games and losers. I have no idea what order it'll go in, so I'm just going to start with losers and make my way up from there. So in one game, we'd have the Atlanta Reign versus the Dallas Fuel. Like with their first round opponent, the Reign are probably in a good spot since they're playing another opponent below their tier of play. This meeting is all about the tanks in my opinion. The DPS and supports are rather close to one another, so this is going to be a pivotal battle. Who shall win up front in the trenches? It really does depend on what we see. If the off-tanks are forced to play a wide variety of heroes, I kind of favor Hawk. While Note may be having a comeback year, I'm still not the biggest fan of his Zarya or Roadhog, so he might get exposed if he can't play a ton of D.Va or Sigma. If Note can get away with his comfort picks though, then I think Dallas could gain the upper hand. I'm of the belief that the meta will be chaotic though, so I say the Reign win 3-1. I think losing to a top tier team again is going to motivate Atlanta and give them a second win, so to speak, during the losers bracket run. The other game is where things could get hype though. Can you imagine if we get the Battle of LA in the playoffs? That would be insane. These two are so close to each other skill-wise, so it would likely result in something epic. Now, after what I just saw a few weeks ago, it would probably be smart to say the Gladiators win. They seem to have an effective strategy that revolves around taking KSP out of the equation. Meanwhile, Space goes out and proves why he was the better Valiant off-tank in his battle against McGravy. The Glads have that small mental advantage too. But if there's one thing I have learned about this Valiant team, it's that they are quite resilient. They never back down from a challenge, and they get better and better with every lesson they learn. Now, I can't speak for McGravy, but I don't think there's a chance in hell KSP has another quiet game, and that could prove to be the ultimate difference maker. If the Valiant can take them to a map 5 when KSP is not completely effective, then just imagine what they could do if he has the room to take over. I am once again trusting in Packing 10 to find the answers. My Discord is going to make fun of me for this, but I am picking the Valiant to win 3-2. The ongoing joke in my Discord community is that whenever I pick the Valiant to win in a big game, they always lose, but whatever. I'm willing to take the heat for this, as I believe the Valiant are going to somehow pull this off. With KSP on Ashe, Rain on the Mercy, and Last Draw on the Ana, it is always going to be winnable. Plus, the Valiant are well overdue for a win against their LA rivals. The last 4 meetings all resulted in losses, and it's about time they break that streak. They'll catch the Gladiators off guard from their overconfidence and sneak away with a W to keep their playoff hopes alive. Now over in the winners bracket, we've got the big 4. First would be Philly versus Florida. It's been a long time since these two have gone at it. I know it was back in May, but surely the Fusion are still looking to dish out some payback for that loss. And you know something? I like their chances. I feel the Fusion can play more heroes and compositions at a high level, and that is going to be critical as we head into a meta that could be very all over the place. I'm a little scared that Philly's going to get a lot more value out of Sombra compared to Florida. Yaki's not a bad Sombra, but I prefer Hisu by a pretty good margin. I suppose the Mayhem could run Yaki on the Tracer a lot of the time instead, but that could make them a bit too one-dimensional, especially if the Fusion do decide to play a lot of Sombra. And I think main support is fairly worrisome as well. It's not just the DPS that have a battle on their hands. Chris isn't exactly known for his Mercy play, and Funny Astra was kind of exceptional on her back in the Atlanta Academy days. I'm going to say the Fusion take it 3-1. Between the better versatility and better overall decision making, I predict that the Mayhem will get overwhelmed. The Fusion just want this more. Carpe's dream to win a title will propel him beyond the competition. Now we move on to a little Summer Showdown rematch with the Shock and Paris Eternal. I don't know if it's just me, but I seriously do see a world where the Shock get seriously challenged. Out of everything San Francisco have played this year, Sombra compositions have been one of their worst. So if she's a staple pick or Paris forces the Shock to run her, then we might have a serious game on our hands. If Paris runs soon on the Sombra, then the Shock better brace for impact. In my opinion, the Paris Eternal just play around a Sombra better. I think their timing and follow-up is just a bit cleaner. Now, of course, the Shock could have changed during that week off, but I have doubts about that. If there's one thing that last year taught me, it's that the Shock may get off to a slow start in the playoffs. Somehow, some way though, I am expecting them to prevail in a 5-map victory. It's not going to be easy, or pretty for that matter, but my gut says there's a chance still that Paris is going to give them a good scare. That's what I'm sticking with. Maybe this will serve as a wake-up call of sorts as the Shock progress to the next round. And that is every NA game for the week, I believe, so let's talk APAC now. There's only 5 of those this week, so we should be able to get through it rather quick. The Spitfire and Hunters are going to start us off on Friday morning. While neither team has consistently made their presence felt in 2020, I would say the Hunters are in the driver's seat currently. They have a crazy amount of momentum going for them after a strong finish to the season. Meanwhile, London were basically limping towards the final stretch. Since there's no double shield, Chengdu is basically free to wreak havoc. I'm talking Wrecking Ball, Zarya, and all things crazy. Pretty much all of the Chengdu Hunters could be playing in their comfort picks. You could have Among on Ball, Late Young Zarya, Yveltal Mercy, and Leave on Ashe. Meanwhile, London have shown they aren't too great at these types of comps. They're pretty much the opposite of Chengdu. A bunch of their players are in roles they are not extremely comfortable with. London would much rather play it slow and steady. The only good thing I can say about London though is they are definitely overdue for a win. If I remember correctly, their last victory came in late June against the Spark? So that sheer desire to finally stop the bleeding will definitely be a driving force. Do I think that will be a big difference maker? No, probably not. Chengdu just look and feel better outside of double shield, so I'm picking them to win in 4 maps over London. I'm of the mindset that the Spitfire are already done and like half of their body is already outside the door. They ended the season in such a poor manner. Their teamwork has shown no signs of improvement, and if anything, it's probably gotten worse. If I'm wrong about this, then I'm wrong, but I stand by the fact that London are not going to find success due to their overall lack of comfort. Chengdu will eat you alive if you aren't sure of yourselves. So if the Hunters were to win this game, that would leave the NYXL having to choose between them and the Seoul Dynasty, with the Spark getting whoever is left over. I'm leaning more towards the NYXL picking Chengdu here. I think they may be a little afraid to pick Seoul because they know what some of those players on that roster are capable of in the clutch. Chengdu are going to be a threat as well, but on paper it might be a matchup they prefer. So the question is, how will this game go? Well, on paper the NYXL are a more well-rounded team, right? So they should be favored. Is it going to be easy for them though? No way. I don't like New York in a Sombra meta at all, and I think that, APAC loves their Sombra, so there's a good chance we see a lot of her this week. But there is some good news if you're a New York fan. Recently, the team showed they are capable in the crazy, chaotic Wrecking Ball and Dive types of compositions. If they can maintain the same kind of pace as Chengdu, then they might be able to assert their dominance due to simply having players with higher skill caps. This game is hard. I know it's risky to go with them, but I say the NYXL take it 3-2. Even if they do play well though, I'm expecting the Hunters to really make them earn this. The Hunters are different compared to the beginning of the year, and there's no doubt about that. They're more confident, they have a new coach, and the meta has turned more towards their favor now that Double Shield is dead. It's going to be tough, and the upset could seriously happen, but something tells me this is not where the NYXL story will end. People have already written them off again, and that's when they become dangerous. As for the other game, it doesn't appear to be as interesting. The Spark literally just embarrassed Seoul in week 29, and the meta is going to have similarities probably. Ashe, Mercy, Sombra, they're all looking to maintain popularity potentially, and that's a bad sign if you're the Seoul Dynasty because you want Fitz on the Ashe in that scenario, but he has to play the Sombra instead. The Dynasty are kind of shooting themselves in the foot for not having a second hitscan player. And another thing, their Mercy situation is not promising. Toby and Slime have both never really been known for their Mercy, and somebody like Mika on the side of Hangzhou is. There's a good chance a similar result to their previous encounter occurs again. I've got the Spark taking the series in 4. If Seoul can get away with double off tank, then they might have a chance, but I'm not going to hold my breath there because the Spark could just play Sas and Zarya and QOQ Hog or something along those lines to counter them. I think the Spark are just a better team in a majority of situations. Unless we see like heavy Tracer comps, let's say, the Spark should have this. And just like that, we're down to the final 2 games of the week, and the festivities kick off when the Dragons pick between the Spark and NYXL, and I could realistically see them picking either opponent, but I have them facing off with the Spark. My philosophy on the selection is that they're very much in the Spark's head at this point. Hangzhou have never even come close to defeating them in 2020, so there's going to be that extra layer of pressure on them to actually get results this time, and it gives Shanghai more confidence as well. I'm going to be real with you here. I give the Spark little to no chance. Besides the they've never beaten them factor, you've got to think about how dangerous Shanghai could be if there is a Sombra dominant meta ahead of us. Lip, in my opinion, has been the number 1 Sombra of 2020 by a decent margin. He just has a better understanding of that hero than everybody else, and his teammates have a better idea of how to capitalize on the power of that hero. If Architect does try to match him, then good luck to him. Lip is fairly dominant in the Sombra mirror. With the odds heavily stacked against them, I am predicting the Spark to get knocked down to the losers bracket in a clean sweep. The Shanghai Dragons have the tactical and mental advantage. They have already won half the battle. This is pretty much their game to lose, I would say. They are the ones in the driver's seat, and I think that will translate into the final results. Now let's talk the next installment of New York versus Guangzhou, and what has been one of the most compelling rivalries of this year. This time they clash with everything on the line, and the meta could have similar aspects to their previous meeting where the NYXL prevailed with ease. Could that spell trouble for the Guangzhou Charge? Maybe, but I get the sneaky suspicion that the Charge are going to have a lot more fight in them this time around. I mainly say that because of the potential Sombra advantage. In most people's opinions, Eileen is miles ahead of anybody on the NYXL on that specific hero. He's probably top 5 in the league at that hero, and don't even get me started with Krung's potential to overpower Bianca and or Hoppa, but at the same time, the NYXL do have the better Mercy player in Animo and Mono, who has asserted his dominance over Rio multiple times in the past. Whoever overcomes their mismatches more is going to be the one who wins. And since I think the Charge have slightly less of them to jump over, I'm going to say the Charge win 3-1. It's a tough call. I'm really torn about this game, but that Sombra difference with Eileen makes me believe that the Charge are going to win. He showed up big for them in the 2019 playoffs and in their Summer Showdown run, and I expect him to do much of the same here. That guy thrives under high pressure environments, and some of those New York DPS players just don't. We shall have to see though, as I think it's a very up in the air type of game. With that said though, those are my week 1 predictions for the playoffs. Sorry if any individual game feels rushed. You kind of have to go quick when there's 18 games to cover. But now we get to the exciting part. Here's my entire pre-playoff bracket. Starting in the NA region, I see the Shock and Fusion making it through due to them being the most powerful and consistent teams. I played it safe with my 2 winners, but as you can see, things get a little spicy in my loser section. I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say the Valiant have a wild lower bracket run that sees them go to the loser semis. This team thrives when nobody believes in them, and I know for a fact that no one's really giving them much of a chance to go far in this thing. So through that chip on their shoulders, they end up surprising some people. My other hot take is that somebody in the top 4 is going to underperform. I said the Mayhem just because the Valiant have beaten them twice already, and I don't see them getting through Philly, but maybe some other top 4 team in the NA region gets upset somehow. With APAC, it's relatively boring. No crazy upsets to be found. Shanghai make it for sure, and I think the Charge outdueled the NYXL for a second time in losers because of the Sombra difference yet again. If there was any chance for an upset, I would say it probably happens if Shanghai were to play Guangzhou, or maybe the NYXL make something happen, but the chances are still low. And finally, we get to the final 4. From there I see the Shock rolling the Charge, followed by a super close game between Shanghai and Philly. From there the Fusion rebounds in the losers bracket and knock the Charge out of the competition, while the Dragons knock down the defending champs into the loser side of things. This is where the Shock get their second win though. Just like in 2019, being one loss away from elimination will be the driving force that puts them back on track. They will end up triumphing over Philly in the end, but then I see them losing to Shanghai in the grand finals, unfortunately, in an epic 7-map series. I am 100% in on the Shanghai Dragons to win the grand finals. I'm going to remain firm that this meta will be one they are absurdly strong in. So there you have it. The Shanghai Dragons, by a slight margin, will be my Season 3 champions. And with that said, I'm just about ready to wrap this up. What are your brackets looking like for this tournament? Let me know down in the comment section. If you guys enjoyed today's content, then it would mean a lot to me if you could like, subscribe, and hit that join button to give me a little bit more support. Don't forget that you can also follow my socials and join my own custom Draft Buff League through the links in the description. Big thanks to Draft Buff for sponsoring this video once again, and to all of you who watched until the very end. And as always, until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.